I'll let you be going, you know.
Okay, well, our meeting is called to order. Please stand for the invocation. Let us pray. O God, for as much as without thee we are not able to please thee, mercifully grant that thy Holy Spirit may in all things direct and rule our hearts. Increase in us the virtues of duty, honor, and loyalty, that we may serve our country, those who are dependent upon us, and those in need. Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Please join us in the pledge of the United States flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mark, would you please lead us?
Yes. On my flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, that exists, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And was?
We the descendants of the heroes of American Revolution, who died in the violence, stand with the United States of America. Reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and of the Constitution of the Republic, and solemnly declare ourselves to the trial.
Richard, would you please lead us?
The sons of the American Revolution honor the Revolutionary War patriot ancestors by promoting patriotism, serving our communities, educating and inspiring future generations about the founding principles of our country.
Please be seated.
There you go, back here. Bill Covington, Carol, because chapter meeting. Our school friends, this is my wife Jill, membership is pending, and we are from the gate. And we, so, and we live in McKinney and grateful to be part of a chapter that spares snow expense. Right. I'm my name is Gary Burnett. I'm Ted Welton, dual member of McKinney and member of the Arlington Chapter.
I'm Jim Akers. This is my wife Sandy. I'm a member of the McKinney Chapter and the Denton Chapter.
Gary Logan, Salina, for this chapter. In my first meeting 3 months ago, I had 2 months, so glad to be.
Mark Crawl from the beginning.
Thank you for the wife, Eddie, my left one.
Hi, I'm Jason from High School and I'm environmental singer.
Casey Booth, I'm being inducted tonight, so.
Thank you, Casey.
Mark Harrison, my wife Linda, Alice Ilman for the
Tom Wilson, my wife Carol, member of this chapter, and quite a few others.
It's nice to know we have an engineer here.
Yeah.
Tom, we have Boston, Dallas chapter, McKinney, and a bunch of others.
John Ray, any chapter, days a whole lot of.
John Brewer, Dallas Chapter from the same chapter. You have a light for me and you got these short body.
Rich Bonaparte, McKinney Chapter, Registrar. Hey Russ, we'll talk later. And my beautiful wife Lynn.
Los Reedy Secretary, and online we have Don Babs and Kay Scott.
I'm Bill Covington from the Arlington, Texas chapter.
Yeah.
And Paul Andreessen here at the McKinney Chapter. So Tom, would you please introduce our speaker tonight, Mr. Bill Covington?
Let's see here, you want to give him up with this, you can give it to him. It's not just how. Okay. Yeah, I can follow along the road. That's what I'll give. This is a very piece of parking time, you can give me these for free.
Okay.
Mark's looking at me like, oh. Hey, so it's my great honor to introduce my good friend, William S. Covington Jr. Calling this Bill. I've known you for a little amount of time now, and he's a great guy. He always comes all dressed up, and he's always got all the different artifacts that he likes to talk about. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about him here tonight. And basically, he's a retired public school teacher. I mean, spent 31 years, right, in the classroom where he taught social studies and English as a second language. He taught in Dallas ISD and Waxahachie ISD. For many years, he was an instructor of dual credit, U.S. history, world history, government/economics at Waxahachie Global High School and Waxahachie Business. He also has served as an adjunct instructor of the Western Civilization, U.S. history, Texas history, and world history at Navasota College, which is also located in Waxahachie. He's married to his wife, June Renee Jacobson, and basically they both live together, of course, in Cedar Hill, Texas. So he made the drive up. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, he has 3 grown children, and I have 2 on here. We got more grandkids. Still got 2 grandkids. Okay. Then a little bit, just a word or two about his SAR participation. He goes around dressed up like this. He goes to all sorts of places. And you didn't wear your fancy
No,
fuzzy.
I didn't, no.
That's all right. He's got this one. It's
A dragoon helmet.
yeah, the boom help. But it's great to see. He's got all sorts of different outfits. Anyway, so Bill was the Texas DAR state winner of 2017, outstanding history, teacher history. Thought that was good. And then we're gonna jump forward to 2025 now, although I think you got 1 or 2 for free. Whole bunch of certificates of appreciation and things. In 2025, Bill was awarded the Patriot Medal, the SAR. And for those of y'all that are new here or don't know it, that is the highest award for exceptional service to the Texas Society. And they only give a very small, I think, well, that's six right now. They're giving 6 a year, out of basically, I guess we're a little under 3,000. 2,900 members in the state of Texas, and they give 6 a year. So anyway, without me going on any further, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and he's going to tell us all about the
Battle of Bunker Hill.
Thank you. Over to you.
Well, I'm glad that Paul did not make me. I think I would have eaten that thing. You know, it's on chopsticks, and then I have a tendency to eat stuff that's on chopsticks. I'm just good enough with them to be dangerous to myself and anybody else I'm eating with. So thank you for the clip on it. With the battles of Lexington and Concord, which would have happened month before last, 250th. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna see a lot of 250s, and they're gonna be coming hot and heavy all the way until 2033. Because I mean, the American Revolution lasted from 1775 to 1783. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the larger world conflict that started as a result of the French becoming our allies, their phase of the American Revolution continued till either 1785 or 86. So, because there was a great deal of fighting that went on in the Caribbean, in West Africa, and in India in particular. And as a matter of fact, the gentleman that we see as the loser at Yorktown, General Cornwallis, was a great military hero to the British because he won all of the engagements he participated in India and actually became, I think, the first military governor of India. And when he died, he chose to be buried there rather than having his body shipped back to England. So, and in particular, right around now, there's a lot of 250s going on. And, well, one thing that I'm going to mention, it's also today is not only the 250th anniversary of John Hancock signing George Washington's commission as the first commander-in-chief of the American Army. It's also the 160th anniversary of Juneteenth. And I've actually got a little something there to throw in. So now I was thinking about it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to travel fast because I've got a lot to cover. But when you really think about it, the troubles that started with the Shah around the world fired on April 17th, 1775, actually had started earlier in September of 1774. General Gage, who was the military governor in Boston, had sent spies out. They had brought back word that the colonial militia were stockpiling ammunition. They were stockpiling gunpowder in several different places around the colony. Gage decided he wanted to make an example of this, and so in September 1774, the British conducted their first raid out of Boston up to Salem, because the Patriots had a powder being stored in Salem. They seized that powder and they brought it back. So something had already happened before they marched out in the early morning hours of April 17th, 1775 towards Concord, because the Patriots knew what they were going for. They're after our gunpowder. And prior to that, things were kind of copacetic because the Americans said the British are in Boston, they're going to stay there in Boston, and we don't have to worry about them. But when they marched from Boston to Salem, the Americans said, now, no corner of our colony is safe, because the British can come after us anywhere we are, and it really heightened their anger. It heightened their... Massachusetts was quite arguably, ladies and gentlemen, the most radicalized of all the colonies at this point, because they were occupied by British troops. Now, so was New York City and a couple of other places, but in Boston, things have been really, really tense. And so when they came out on the morning of April 17th, 1775, the colonists were ready. They were ready to respond with force. And of course, Lexington, we all know how that went. That only 2 British soldiers were wounded, 9 American patriots were killed, 17 were wounded. But when they got to the Old North Bridge is when the colonists began to return fire and inflict casualties on the British. So there were still people in Continental Congress that felt like we have not yet crossed the point of no return. We can still have a peaceful approach from the British. Now, when we captured Fort Ticonderoga, the 250th anniversary of that was this past May 10th. The Patriots started thinking, that was our first offensive action. We actually captured a British position and seized all the personnel, the garrison. We seized all the artillery. Things were getting a little bit more serious. And so when Patriots began to receive, and it was a very, very good spy network within Boston, Patriots gathering information, slipping it out to the Americans. And I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. On June 14th of this year, we obviously celebrate Flag Day, but this particular June 14th, Flag Day is the anniversary of the US Army, the oldest arm of the US military that is in existence. On June 14th of this year, we celebrated the 250th anniversary of the birth of the US Army. The very next day on June 15th was the commissioning, the 250th anniversary of announcing that the new commander-in-chief was going to be George Washington. The interesting thing is when John Adams very much did not want a New Englander chosen as commander-in-chief because it could start to look a little too much like a New England war. It's Lexington and Concord, both in Massachusetts. Fort Ticonderoga is just a few miles across the border into New York. Israel Putnam, who was a general from Massachusetts, had put forward his name as the new commander-in-chief. And Adams did not want that to happen. He wanted the southern colonies to join in the war. And so they deliberately went to the delegates from Virginia, the oldest of the colonies. I mean, that's the reason why she's got the nickname Old Dominion. And they said, we want one of your delegates chosen as the commander-in-chief of this army, hopefully to pull the southern colonies into this conflict also. So there's probably a reason. I've heard 3 reasons why George Washington was selected. He was the only delegate of the Virginias who he's the only delegate, period, who wore a uniform. He wore the same uniform that he would wear through the 8 years of the American Revolution, a blue coat with buff facings. Buff, we would call it tan today. And so wherever you see red on this uniform coat, you would have tan facings. And that was one reason. The other one was his impressive height. He was, and you know, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know how tall our first president was. He had never been measured for, never had a full head to foot measurement while he was alive. After he had passed away, he would have been 69. So after he passed away, they measured him for his casket, and he measured in at 6'3.5". So, but he's older at that point. He could have lost an inch or maybe 2. So they're figuring somewhere between 6'5" and 6'3.5". They have pieced together his clothing and said, okay, yeah, that fits the range of how tall he would have been. And as I would always tell my students in high school, and I tell everybody else, he must have made a beautiful target sitting up on horseback. But he was never hit, either during the French and Indian War or after the Battle of Monongahela. He found 4 bullet holes in his coat, but none of the bullets had actually hit him. And of course, during the American Revolution, he's never wounded either. But the last reason, which I think is probably the most ridiculous, it's probably really a joke, but it's one of my favorite ones, and that was that when the other delegates looked at him, they looked at his chiseled features. He was handsome. I mean, ladies, he literally had the physique of a modern NFL quarterback. I mean, he was a buff guy. And a little bit scarred because he had smallpox when he was 18, but he was a very, very handsome man, and Americans looked at him and thought, you know, when they start making statues of famous Americans, he's going to look good as a statue. So let's choose this guy, to be our. So they commissioned. They did not actually give him his commission until today. Today is the 250th anniversary of John Hancock signing his commission. He then got on horseback, relatively unescorted, and he rode up to Boston. Now, the Battle of Bunker Hill had taken place 2 days before that, on the 17th of June. Americans in the city received information that the British were planning on crossing the Back Bay of Boston and occupying Breeds Hill and Bunker Hill, which were just to the east of Charles. I don't know if it's pronounced Charleston. It is, okay, thank you, sir. I didn't know if it was Charleston or Charlestown. But Boston was really kind of it's really kind of a geographical anomaly at this point, because you've got this large bay. And Boston is out on this peninsula, that in Boston Neck, the part that actually connected Boston to the mainland was only a quarter of a mile wide. And then Charleston, right across the harbor from Boston, was the same thing. It was a Charleston Neck connected the Charleston and these two hills to the mainland of Massachusetts. The Back Bay has been filled in, so it's really kind of hard to stand today at Bunker Hill or Breeds Hill and look down the hill, down row after row after row of houses, and kind of picture that at one point this was basically a huge cow pasture, and that's where the battle took place. But on the 13th of June, they received information the British were planning on moving across the Back Bay and capturing Charleston, fortifying it against the Patriots. So they gave men permission on the 14th of June, Flag Day, to slip onto Breeds Hill and begin to fortify it. Well, I'm not really sure why, ladies and gentlemen, it took the Brits 3 days to figure out that the colonials were building a fortification over there. So General Gage immediately sent troops, loaded them in whaleboats, sent them across the harbor. It was an easy rowing job, just not that far. I mean, after all, Paul Revere rowed across the bay back about 2 months earlier, and they landed at the foot of Bunker Hill and formed up in line of battle and began to march up the hill. Now his men, as I've heard the story, went up the hill unarmed. I mean, they had guns with bayonets, but their muskets were unloaded. And I've heard 2 stories as to why they were unloaded. The first one was that Gage was attempting to make a point to the Americans: we're not afraid of you. You've got loaded guns, you're gonna be shooting at us, but we're gonna take this hill by the point of the bayonet. Now that's one story I've heard. The other one I've heard is that General Gage was a secret Whig. He was a secret, I guess, liberal in the British government. He actually supported the Americans' efforts at gaining their independence. And what he wanted to do was he was willing to play with the lives of his troops to get them massacred. And then he would go back to the king and say, this is the way this whole war is going to go. We might as well go ahead and give it up right now. So I'm not sure which one of those 2 are accurate, if either of them are accurate, but they marched up the hill. Walter Prescott is up on top of the hill. He had been very, very active man. His is the statue that's right outside the Bunker Hill Monument. It's I'm sorry, his name's Samuel Prescott. And he was very active in getting his men organized. Well, the British officers over in Boston were using their telescopes, and they picked him out. And somebody said, isn't that Samuel Prescott? Because Prescott's cousin, who was a loyalist, was there in the room with them. There's all kinds of personal stories about the Battle of Bunker Hill, and this is to me one of the most poignant ones, because they turned to his cousin. I don't know what his name was, I'm sorry. They said, will they fight? And his cousin paused for a few moments and said, I cannot speak for his men, but Samuel will fight you to the very gates of hell itself. And so they knew they were in trouble. And he's the one. Now, we don't know who actually said, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. That was something that had entered military tradition probably almost 200 years earlier, because Gustavus Adolphus, the famous general of the 1600s, he was Swedish. He told his grenadiers, do not fire until you can see your own image reflected in the eyes of your opponent. And so that type of phrase was, but somebody did say it up there in the American position. Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Let them get as close as possible before you actually open fire. They were also using what were called buck and ball rounds. Now, they had no rifles. There were no riflemen at this point in the siege of Boston. They were still hot footing and on their way 30 miles a day from Virginia or Pennsylvania towards Boston. Washington was still on his way up to Boston when the battle took place. So they all had fowling pieces, which basically are guns that are meant for bird shooting. And they had loaded a probably they're 69. I've seen some that get as high as 80 caliber, but they've got a solid ball down there plus 10 pieces of 30 caliber buckshot. And so when they opened up, there was basically a wall of lead that was flying down the hill. They massacred the first rank. Those guys broke, the survivors broke and ran back down the hill. They reformed at the bottom of the hill. They began to move back up. Same thing, they waited for them to get really, really close. And then they fired again. Again, the survivors ran back down the hill. And General Gage actually led the third wave up the hill. He had white, they're what are called spatter dashers. They basically come up to like mid-thigh here, and then they reach down your shoe. They got about 30 buttons down the side, so they take a long time to put on. His spatter dashers were actually stained pink because of the blood of his men on the grass. And Major Pitcairn of the Royal Marines was actually in front, but Gage was with that last line as they went up. Another story, Major Pitcairn, they actually, by this point, the Patriots had run out of ammunition. And so their third volley was very ragged. It killed a few British, but not that many of them. And they actually mounted the parapets and went over into the Patriot positions. Major Pitcairn had a phrase that he loved to utter, and he would always say, the day is ours. And he would shout it so that his men would hear that and they would be encouraged by the fact that, hey, the boss says we're winning. But he also wanted the enemy to hear that, meaning we're coming for you. We are the ones who are winning this day, and you're going to get the short end of it. As he mounted the parapets, he said, the day is ours, and he was immediately shot in the forehead. Now, the interesting thing, many accounts say the person who shot him was a man named Peter Salem. He was African American. He had just recently been freed by his owner, a man named Lawson Buckminster. And Lawson Buckminster had just been commissioned as a major in the Continental Army. And so he decided, I need to manumit Peter because he's willing to fight. He's willing to fight with the militia. Peter would eventually end up joining John Nixon's regiment, which would become the 6th Massachusetts Regiment of Foot, and he fought with them all the way from 1785 to 1780. So he fought them for 5 years, from 75 to 80. He shot him in the forehead. John Pitcairn staggered backwards. He fell into the arms of his son, Ensign Thomas Pitcairn, who cried out, I have lost a father. And according to everything I read today, he was well respected by the other British Marines. British Marines in the American Revolution rarely ever served on board a ship. They usually were foot troops, they were ground troops. And out at sea, there would be Marine contingents on board ships, but usually when they were on land, they fought on foot. And so he was greatly mourned. But if you've seen the famous picture of the Battle of Bunker Hill with Joseph Warren, he's prone on the ground, he's being cradled by an individual, the individual's attempting to block a bayonet thrust. And British officers reaching over to knock the bayonet thrust away. Behind them, you will see an officer who is clearly been wounded in the arms of two men behind him, and that's John Pitcairn. John Pitcairn had actually been the whole distance with the troops on the morning of April 17, 1775, through Lexington to Concord and in the bloody retreat back. He actually lost a pair of matched pistols, and they were found and given to General Israel Putnam, and they basically became heirlooms in his family because it was told later on where those guns came from. So at this point, Americans begin to die. I do not know why the name Joseph Warren is not more important in American history than it is, because he was killed by British troops. They're attempting to cover his men retreating him. He had a sword. He just whipped a sword out, and there's all these guys with bayoneted muskets coming towards him, and he fought back against them and was killed. But about 300 to 400 Americans died at that point. I've heard that so much gunpowder had been spent in that battle that the American troops effectively had to feel their way off the hill because the cloud gunpowder smoke was just so heavy. It was the single bloodiest day of the American Revolution. About 1,000 British soldiers were either killed or wounded on that day. The second bloodiest day would be October 10th, 1779, the Anglo-French assault, final assault on what's known as the Spring Hill Redoubt at the siege of Savannah, Georgia, and the turn of the Americans and the French to sustain those kind of losses. Except that one thing's kind of interesting about the Battle of Bunker Hill, just statistically speaking, if you look at the entire 8 years of the American Revolution, on that day, of all the British officers that were killed in the American Revolution, 25% of them died on that one day. There were times where Gage was the only officer still on his feet. And so, and of course, when Continental Congress gets the word of this, they think, okay, we've gone even further now towards there not being a rapprochement, but there were still delegates who would believe through the fall that in the winter that we can have a rapprochement, but that would be successfully done away with in January 1776, because two things happened. One, Thomas Paine published Common Sense, and the Americans, the colonists, received word that the British were hiring Hessians and sending them over to the colonies. So that was pretty much the point where they said, okay, we need to write a Declaration of Independence. So, you ladies and gentlemen, have any questions? I think yes.
Troops from the Americans,
Okay, I do not, just number wise, I'm not really sure about that. I would say that there were probably at least 12 to 1,500 of them there. They were all from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire. And I think there was a few from Rhode Island that were there, but they were all New Englanders who were there. It would take a little while for, on another thing that these farmers didn't understand, because back on June 10th, they created the US Army. And they said, okay, we gotta have somebody, I'll tell you what, all those farmers that are around Boston, they're soldiers now. And they're enlisted for 1 year, whether they like it or not. So I can imagine when word finally reached those guys, what? For what now? No, I got crops, I've got to harvest. And but yeah, that was and Washington had to deal with that when he got up there. He wrote in his journal that New Englanders are crafty, devious people with nasty accents. And so that was his view. So, but are any other questions? Yes.
1774, where was the first magazine you captured?
It was in Salem. Yeah, and if I I understand, or if I remember my Massachusetts geography, Salem's just north of Boston. And I don't think it was as far as Concord was 20 miles. Yeah, and Salem was just real, and so I think they kind of overextended themselves in April of 1775. We can get, but maybe they were wanting to prove to the Americans, we can march through your homeland and take this stuff and make it back, and so yes.
I know it's called Battle of Bunker Hill, but wasn't it most of the fighting on Breed Hill?
Yeah, most of the fighting was on Breeds Hill, there was a little bit on Bunker Hill, but I don't know why it ended up with that. With the name Bunker Hill. And because, yeah, I mean, and you see both, I see the Battle of Breeds Hill, the Battle of Bunker Hill. Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me to.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I always enjoy this because he just stands up and he starts talking. And it's just like
31 years.
31 years of teaching kids, right? We'll do this to you. So much. Oh, anyway. Like I said, he's one of my favorites here. So I've got you've got a 100,000 of these things, but
No, this, the second one, you guys have given me this framed, so.
so I'm expecting someday I'll see this wall full of these. Look, here, let's do this right quick and then I'll do it. There you go. So anyway, so this just basically says William S. Covington Jr. is hereby awarded a certificate of appreciation in recognition of his continued support to the McKinney Chapter, Texas Sons of the American Revolution, by presenting his program, Battle of Bunker Hill, chapter meeting on this day, which is week 19. I'm signing for you. So anyway, appreciate you, brother. Yep, and how's the mic working in the back? You're all here today?
Oh, yeah.
A lot better. Okay.
Sorry, family.
Next on the agenda is the new business, and we have we're going to induct Casey into the McKinney Chapter, so please come forward, Casey. So there's the format here, so I would ask that you raise your right hand. Patriot Casey Booth, please raise your right hand. You, as a descendant of one of the patriots and heroes of the American Revolution, reaffirm your ancestors' faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic. And will you pledge to support the National Society Sons of the American Revolution? I now take great pleasure in presenting you your membership certificate. I want to take a picture. Also, would you be willing to remember this rosette? Some of you may have never seen one. You see it here, blue and white. Buff.
That's in blue.
Sort of like a painting.
Thank you. So it's buff and blue. I would suggest to look at. I just stick it in the chairs.
I'm sorry, they represent the colors of George Washington's uniform.
Yeah, so blue and buff colors represent the colors, the uniform worn by General George Washington. So we're so we welcome you, Casey, to McKinney Chapter. Yes, you would work with us to fulfill the purposes and objectives of the Sons of the American Revolution. Do you have anything that you know about your ancestor that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I can share a little bit, so I guess my story, like a lot, just got lost over time. It wasn't really something that was passed down and that I was aware of until past year or so. A cousin of mine is a member of the Rochester chapter, so he was the first and I'm the second now. On my mom's side, probably 5 generations go back in the Rochester area, and the story just kind of been lost over those generations, and then probably the next 5 generations are New London, Connecticut. So that's where my ancestor was born. Commissioned major for the 2nd Regiment in Kentucky. He lived the rest of his days there, surrounded by the other generations. It's buried there. And I liked Rich's presentation a few months back. Maybe I could do a little bit more on kind of the family history and lineage, even going further back after something maybe.
Available, so you better get on.
So yeah, I'd love to get more info in the future, but yeah, that's what I have for today.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Anything else? Well, next on the agenda is the announcements and old business. Do we have any announcements?
We got a parade coming in up Saturday in Farmersville.
Okay, this Saturday, parade in Farmersville,
The Audie Murphy.
Ronnie Murphy. Okay,
We,
is there a point of contact that people should contact? Good,
Bill Covington.
okay,
Yeah.
And May 30.
8:30 is the gathering point. Behind the First Baptist Church. Parade at 9. The short parade. You go over there. You'll have time to have dinner.
okay.
I know that
Yes.
most of us know who Audie Murphy was, but I'm not sure that everybody knows who Audie Murphy was. Y'all know Audie Murphy? That's it. Okay. Audie Murphy grew up in Farmersville, Plainview, Greenville, also Plainview. But nevertheless, he was the most decorated soldier in World War II. He became a movie star of some fair ability. But nevertheless, he was the most decorated soldier in World War II. Now, y'all can add to that. Yes, John.
The Audie Murphy Museum of Greenville has a copy of all of his medals. There's a half of the museum is Cotton Museum about Greenville. The other half is about Audie Murphy. And it's worth driving to Greenville to do it. It's out on Interstate 30, just east of where the big flagpole is. We paid $100,000 for the flagpole up at Greenville.
And there is a portrait in the Collin County Courthouse of Audie Murphy.
It's actually down in Kingston.
Yeah.
Medal of Honor.
That's a lot of.
And do you remember a year or two ago, was that his sister or wife that spoke at they had like a thing right after the parade was over, you went to the tent, she was there with all his grandkids. I don't know if you were there for that.
I was not.
But it was like his last family relative.
He did have a younger sister.
Yeah, that's who it was. She spoke there. She passed away like early last year, I think. But all his grandkids were there.
He was white, but he was.
He wrote a book called To Hell and Back. Yeah.
It's a superb movie to Hell and Back.
Yeah.
Great, superb movie.
And in Farmersville, they have a new museum and half of it's Audie Murphy in there. And my father, my dad was probably 5 or 6 years old. Audie Murphy was a movie star, came into town in a convertible took the kids driving around town and Dad would tell me that story too.
And when we organized the McKinney chapter of the SAR, there was at least some, desire on some part that we should name this the Arlington chapter. That he was quite the hero. So now you know about.
Thank you, thank you.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
1995, June 15th, 30 years ago, Major White inducted me into the SAR.
All right.
That's all very cool.
Well done.
Well, thank you, thank you. Now, our next meeting, according to the agenda, is July 17th. And then we also have some information on the back cover, you can easily access that. Most notably is the General T.L. Holden Memorial Service on the June 21st tomorrow. And that would be in New Mexico. Tom was telling me that he knows at least a couple of people who will probably make that trip. But,
Carol, no. I noticed on our next meeting on July 17th, and I don't know if anybody else is gonna be attending the SAR National Congress, but that's gonna be in Connecticut, and it's gonna be including that particular date, so I won't be here. Anybody else gonna be going to Congress?
My future, he just got this man. I do. Mike Good. Michael Good. So, Michael Good is the chaplain at the SAR, he's also the district vice president and also the color guard, the veteran chair. And he will receive the Westmoreland Award at the Congress, that's the highest award that can be for veterans.
We're going down the list, basically. Bill Watson, which I like it, and it's over to. T2, as we call them, the other column, Peter, right?
Yeah, this time is T3.
Yeah.
Those of you know what it's T1. Tom Manning, right? T4. Two things I want to say before I get into that. Thank you again. That's what I hadn't heard you do. Nelson does programs here. I do programs for Dallas, and we trade speakers. He's coming to me in July. So if you want to hear about the second different Paul Revere of the South, come to our Dallas meeting on the 12th, and he's got a great presentation about Bill Watts. We've been doing a lot of planning, and we spent some time with the people over at Rest Haven, which is in Rockwall. And it's going to be on the 26th, which is Saturday at 2:00. It will be in the chapel at the funeral home. It will not be a long service. It's not what Bill wanted. It's going to be non-event for what he did for the work. And for those of us who were there, remember, it was very short, very sweet, and then he'll be interred. And there will be a color guard column that will do a musket fire, and that's really fun. Anybody that wishes, I would ask that you, Bill's wishes were that no flowers. He's established two funds, one for the color guard and one for youth education. You're gonna hear more about that over the next week. When the obituary comes out, or something out from the state president, that will tell you if you really feel so moved, please make a contribution to one of those funds. He was so enthralled and loved the SAR so much. They wanted to leave these funds for the purposes of color guard and the youth. So I really emphasize that. That's what they should get. So I hope to see everybody on the 26th.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, we want to have Tom give an update on the event at 2:50.
Sure. Oh, sure. Correct, you don't need to do that, didn't you? The meeting is that. Okay, so, I think many of you know, we keep talking about this and we've got quite a few people that are supporting this. Downtown McKinney at the, basically it's the Collin County Historical Museum, okay, which is in the old post office downtown, it's right off the square. The DDR is putting this on, okay, and basically I think it's a great little program. I know quite a few, maybe you've been there. It's good. It's 12 panels. We talk about different portions from equal person's perspective. We'll talk about one or two people on each one of these for the most part. And also it has a couple of panels on basically the Texas connection to the Revolutionary War. So you can ponder that for a while, and I suggest you want to go down there if you don't know what the Texas connection to the Revolutionary War was, go down there and find out. So the museum's open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Okay, and it's free, just come on in, look at the panels, they have 3 kiosks that have different program things on. The first kiosk has basically broken up into 3 different parts. They have the Northern campaign, Southern campaign of the Revolutionary War, and also the overall war. The second kiosk, you can basically pull up bios of some of the famous people that we've associated with the Revolutionary War period. And the third kiosk talks about all the battlefields that you can visit, some information about all the battlefields. So it doesn't take you all that long unless you watch all those movies. If you watch all of those to completion, I think it takes a half hour to get through those, maybe even a little more. They're a little bit long, but if you got a specific one like me, a lot of people know about the Northern campaign because you hear about that all the time, but my favorite was from the Southern campaign. It was all sort of a different thing, as some of you, many of you know, and they did a very good job on that one, I thought. So anyway, so like for you to come down, please come down. It's not hard to get to. There's plenty of places to eat afterwards, so you can have a nice lunch. Come down and see it, and we'd love to have you. It's going to run through July the 5th. Okay, again Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think as of today, we had a whole room. I think we're up around 400.
We're good at 377.
Okay, he was here Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, 377.
377 visitors so far. And today was really good because at least when I was there, we had a bunch of kids there and it was really fun. They really enjoyed it. We have a little scavenger hunt, we call it for them. So they go around and try to find answers to these questions that are on these basically posters. And then whether they, get 100 or get a 0, we give them an American flag. That flag was donated by our chapter, who basically was donated to us for the VFW here in McKinney. So more than I ended up with 240 flags. So anyway, so I decided we would use that as a gift so we could that. So each one of the kiddos that go through that, they get a flag. So anyway, please come. Oh, and we do still need a few more people to help coverage. So I'll talk to Mark about it. We've got 3 dates that we still need to cover right now. And if you're interested, let me know. One of them is in the morning, which is 8 to 1. Okay, on June the 21st. The next one is on, that's a Saturday. And the next one is on June the 28th in the morning. And then also July the 4th in the afternoon. Okay, so that's the ones that are available. Other than that, we have basically sponsorship, SAR sponsorship for all of them, which includes people from our chapter, from the Dallas chapter, from the Denton chapter, and leave some out. And there's probably some others. And of course, there's typically at least 2 DAR ladies there also. That's probably more than you wanted. There you go.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
4th of July, they're doing the parade, right? Are you
We are.
announcing, are you? gonna have
Well,
people on the-
well, the DAR is doing. Right, they're not doing a float
Okay,
this year. They're doing a car, and then they're gonna walk behind the car. I don't know how many of them are actually gonna be there. They were struggling because they had this to do, and then the parade was a little bit more than they were aiming to do. We've had a parade in the past, but unfortunately, the last person that was pulling the credit for us was T.L. Holden. And so he passed away, and we struggled trying to find some. We still have a trailer that we could use, but the problem is that we couldn't find anybody to pick up.
picking up truck to pull it.
I think we need to do that, guys, by the way, next year. We need to do what we gotta do to have a nice representation. I know that the DAR is already planning what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
On the trailer that John pulls. He pulls their trailer because your daughter rides in it. He also does the Reach Across America with. That's definitely more.
I want to thank y'all, everyone that's been helping us for the VA and Marvin. We're gonna be doing a cookout for the veterans for 27th. Which you'll find you before Casey July. We've been cooking like 700 hot dogs for the veterans that are in the VA. But we appreciate everything that y'all are doing with this tractor. They really do appreciate what y'all are doing.
What he's saying.
John put hot dogs, I'm sure. But John and others.
Okay, well, moving on to the agenda, we need to approve the May minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the May minutes?
Well, Mike Baldwin.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on that topic? All in favor, say aye. We've won. Any dissenters? No? Okay. Hearing none. Okay, the treasurer report. Peter is absent this evening. I think he's sick. So let me get the treasurer's report for June 19th, 2025. The chapter's funds for the main meeting were $9,311 with 85 cents. The expenses for the month were $46.67 for a new check order, $111.25 for SAR medals and awards, $77.94 for Christmas cards, $88.61 for award frames, $100 for blank certificates, $73.23 for award dinners at Spring Creek Barbecue, and then $27.05 for Ancestry.com subscription for the registrar. The income he has is $500 as a chapter donation. So that brings us to the chapter's available funds, $9,287 with a dime, 10 cents. This does not include the project 2026 money, $1,860. Any questions or comments about that? Okay. Any other announcements from the floor or other business? Okay, well, hearing none. Please stand for the benediction. That's all. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ keep you and be with you now and always. Amen. And our recessional. Until we meet again, let us remember our obligations to our humble fathers, who gave us our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Supreme Court, and education of freedom. Our meeting is adjourned.
Do you have